Welcome to the Freedom Founder Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Duggar. Did you know that in 2021, Google had over 90% of the global market search, and also 28.6% of the share of revenues for worldwide advertising? That's just in 2021. So now you move to today, that market share has got to be even more expansive. But today I have with me an expert in PPC advertising, pay-per-click advertising for those that are less familiar with that. Ameet specializes in PPC advertising and has spent the last decade figuring out why people do what they do online, what prompts them to take action, and how to use that insight to make marketing work better. Now, today she's using that experience to design dazzling campaign strategies for clients and to teach future generations of PPC pros at the university level. So welcome, Ameet. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Zach.
Absolutely. I want to clarify, I'd put in the title of this from catering to clicks, but it's actually event planning was the first business that you'd gotten started in.
It was dance competitions, and I am not a dancer. So
okay. All right. Well, you had told me that story. Now it seemed you were motivated to start that business by someone else. I think if you would like to share that story with us, I think it would be a great point of starting.
Yeah, I started volunteering with an organization when I was about maybe 17 or 18 to amp up my resume for, just having it on your resume really at this point. And eventually at one point I started volunteering at other organizations, and somebody had said something along the lines of, maybe you should try doing it on your own. You'd be pretty good. And I remember I went back to the original organization and I told the founder, and he basically told me that he didn't think that I had it in me. So naturally I had to prove everyone wrong, and did so. And at one point they actually had to release a statement saying that they were going to shut down their main event. And I got credited in it as well, which was kind of the icing on the cake, where I'm like, yes, now you know not to mess with me. So
with the proper motivation, you can accomplish great things.
For me, it seems to be anger. So if you make me mad, you're going to see the other half of it, right? So
yeah, and that propels you forward in that circumstance. So now talk to us about where you moved from there, from starting and doing some event planning to the next step in the journey that takes you all the way to today. So kind of talk about that timeline and what you did over those years.
Yeah, so I started that event planning company when I was 19. So I did that for about 3 years while I was still in school. And once I graduated school, I decided that I didn't want to be in British Columbia anymore. So I'm Canadian, and decided to leave BC and go over to Alberta, basically. And I wandered around for a little bit.
For those of us that are not as familiar with Canada, talk about the location, just so we get an idea of where's British Columbia, where's Alberta.
British Columbia is our west coast, basically. So the furthest west that you can kind of really go in Canada, I guess. And Alberta is the neighboring province or state, if we want to make that correlation, I guess.
Sure.
So Alberta is kind of like the area, they call it the Texas of Canada, if that gives you an idea of the demographic.
All right.
And I knew that I was going to like it, but I didn't expect it to like it as much as I did, to the point where I actually stayed for 8 years. Like a lot of my friends and family were like 3 months to maybe a year. Like they were actually placing bets, and again, pissed me off. So I decided to stay for 8 years and make a whole career out there. So when I left, I actually basically made up my mind, and 5 days later it was gone. Like,
oh wow,
didn't know anybody in that province. Had no job, basically no money, just went, let's see what happens. Like, I was young and naive, and I had the nerve to do it. So I did, and I'm grateful for that 23-year-old to take that leap, because things worked out pretty well for me 10 years later. So
absolutely.
I wandered around for a little bit, did some like temp jobs here and there
Mhm.
once I was trying to figure out what to do. And then I remembered that I wanted to be Google Ads and Analytics certified while I was still in school. And I had just
Okay.
come across like a note in one of my like books or something. And I went, oh yeah. So I literally just opened up the examinations and started just going through them.
Yep.
And then about, I want to say like 3 weeks after I got my certification, somebody sent me an email and said, you have the skill set that we've been looking for. And I
Okay.
kind of sat there and went, okay. And it was interesting because the avatar on that email was like basically, you know, that Facebook one where there's no face, it's just like a
Yep.
shadow of a person.
Yes.
It was basically
Yes.
that, but it was to his features, so you could tell that it was like custom made for him.
Okay.
But it was still a little weird where you're just like, who would send you an email? Like what professional would
Right.
send you that email? And I remember looking at my boyfriend at that time and I went, I don't like, this seems a little strange. And he just went, go there, like to the building. If
Yep.
it seems sketchy, turn around. If it doesn't, go in. And he's like, really at this point, like this is probably, because he's like, it could be real and we don't know really at
Right.
this point, right?
Sure.
So
Make
I
sure you
booked
go there
the,
in daytime, not
yeah,
at night.
exactly. Like a lot of, make sure you call me, send me a picture, where is
Yeah.
the address, all of those things, right?
Right. Yep.
And yeah, so I booked a meeting or an interview with them, and turns out it was a legitimate business, a
Yep.
rather large legitimate business. So I found my way upstairs and interviewed with the VP of marketing at that time.
Okay.
And I think on that spot, or it was during that day, I can't quite remember if it was like literally as I was leaving or he had called me an hour afterwards, but he basically offered me the position right there and then.
Yeah.
And I started a couple days afterwards, and it was kind of interesting because I had run ads before, but I was spending
Yep.
maybe $250 a month, so like $3,000 a year at
Okay.
this point. And so there's learning, and of course you can learn quite a bit, but the curve is not super steep. It's pretty shallow on that end because you can only do so much with $250.
Right.
So I kind of went in. Thankfully, somebody on the team had an idea that I wasn't fully well versed in it. So he kind of showed me some ins and outs of like how to get display campaigns running and how they'd done it before and all of this other great
Yep.
stuff. And then from there, it was just this spark of wanting to learn more and getting really obsessed, because that's just like my personality is if I get obsessed
Sure.
with it, I will know everything about it.
Yeah.
So I went from spending that $3,000 a year to 4.3 million, basically what felt like overnight.
Yeah.
And that learning curve was very steep and
Right.
very fast.
Yeah.
So it just basically became my life. And within 4 months, I ended up joining a Google partner community because I didn't know who else
Mhm.
to talk to. I was the only person in the company that was doing PPC, and also one of two people who actually understood what I did for a living. And even there,
Right.
the VP of marketing kind of didn't really know what I did for a living, but kind of did all at the same time. So I
Saw
went
the
online.
value in it, but
Yeah, he
they
saw the
didn't fully
value. Like,
understand it.
yeah, exactly. So
Yep.
they were looking, and they thankfully found me somehow. And I went and found an online community and started asking questions after I kept on hitting roadblocks where I'd be like, I don't know. I'm like, I get to this point, and then I'm like, I don't know what happens here.
Right.
And it caught the eye of a couple of community members, especially the ones that had way more experience than I had, simply because they sat there and looked at me and went, we really like how you approach problems. Like, you look at it, you see it from different angles, you go at it, and then you fail, and that's when you come to us, versus looking at the problem going, this is too hard, and then you go back to the community and be like, can you fix this for me, right? Like,
Right.
it's like that was the easier route, of course. And I always took, and if you know anything about my life, I always take the harder route for everything. So
Right.
it was just like in my personality to do so, but it was enough that it caught their attention.
Yeah.
And then eventually it caught Google's attention. So they ended up naming, or not naming me, but they spotlighted me within about 4 months of the community and said that I was a great member, and sent a cake and a bunch of other really, really nice gifts and stuff. It was really
Excellent.
cool.
Yeah.
That was when Google was at like its finest. I genuinely believe
Right.
that was the heyday. Like, I miss those days.
Yeah.
And then 2 months after that, they actually gave me the title of Rising Star and asked me to join their ambassador program, which I did for
Okay.
2 years.
Yep.
There was 25 of us, I want to say, and we were all in North America.
Wow.
There was only 5 of us in Canada.
Okay.
And the 2 West Coasters were both Albertans, and we were both about 20 minutes away from each other as well, which was the funny part.
Right.
So it was one of those things that was really cool because we were like the test flight for it. So we were the first ever to be in this ambassador program, but we were also the only people in the world to have that title.
Right.
And I think it might have expanded to maybe about 50, like 25 other people, but like, there's probably only 50 people in the world that can say that they have the Rising Star title, which is still very cool to me, even though it doesn't really mean anything anymore. But like, I still get to say it. I'm one of 50 at the very least, right?
Right.
So then eventually, right. It's really cool. So then after that, I ended up leaving that agency just because I wasn't able to close the gap. So I'm really like interested in finding out what people do on the website as well, because that's data for me, and the company I was working for at that point was very like, just send the traffic, we'll figure it out afterwards. And I hated that. I wanted to figure out what that other piece was. So I ended up leaving for a different agency they were all services at that time. So they looked at me and they were like, you can head up our PPC department and you can just kind of take over and run with it. And I was like, perfect. Admittedly, the role was not that at all. But I got to learn a lot more, like more about SEO, a bit more about social content, web dev, and all of those things that I wasn't going to learn from the other company that I was with. So I was there for about a year, and then something kind of just switched in my head where I was like, I want to work from home and I don't want to be in the office all the time. So eventually the type of employee that I'm probably the worst, where I just literally make up the rules, and then I change them on you. So there was one morning they were doing construction in the building because they had bought the entire building. They're like, we want to do like a rooftop patio or something. And I remember smelling like steel being like welded together. I was gonna say wielded together. I'm like, I know that's not the word.
No, you got it.
Welded together. And I remember smelling it and I was like, this is disgusting. Like, I don't want to be in this. So I literally sat there for half an hour, and then I looked at my project manager as I'm putting my books in my bag, and I'm like, I'll see you in a week or something. And she just kind of looked at me and went, good for you. Good for you. And then I got home, sent an email to both my bosses, and I was like, I will not be returning. This is where I work now. And they couldn't say anything.
Right.
So I went and did that. And then once I got that taste of working at home, I kind of wanted just to keep on doing it. So I started taking freelance projects, eventually left the agency, started freelancing with them for a little bit, but that just like didn't really work. And then eventually stopped white labeling and started taking on clients myself and just went, let's just try this thing out. And then somehow that snowballed into an agency of my own, which has been really kind of cool to see happen, because it's one of those moments where like you kind of try to pinpoint how it happened and you're just like, I have no idea. Like, I know it was meant to be, but I just like don't know how exactly we got here.
Right. That progressive path over time and that pursuit of more. I mean, it's something that you are pursuing and continuing to find new satisfaction in other areas, and wanting to close the gap, like you said, and be a part of something in completion. And then, the welding was not the right fit in this work environment that you're in. So working from home, that spurs you into that next step on that way to where you are today. So that's excellent, and a very excellent story to get to Hop Skip Media and what you're doing now. So talk to us about Hop Skip Media and what you're focusing on and the type of clients that you work with.
So we're a pay-per-click advertising agency. That is literally our only specialization. And that's because when I went off freelancing on my own for a little bit, I tried full service and very quickly, like 45 days quickly, figured out that it was not for me. I'm an okay project manager. I am not a great one. I know my skills and my flaws, and PPC was where my heart is and always has been. So then eventually I sat there and I remember looking at a friend and I went, I'd rather be great at one thing and rather than being mediocre at 5. So I made that decision. I went, I'm going to be the ads girl. And that was a reputation that I was already starting to build without even me realizing it. So it was natural for me to just keep on going down that route. So we just kind of just kept on going. So I ended up making a name for myself by fixing conversion tracking issues. Basically, people would come back and be like, we're not making money on ads, and we don't know how to tell. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, okay, there's a couple things that we need to fix up here. So I would sit there and create these measurement plans, which I've ditched now because I was like, these don't mean anything. Like, it's just for me to know. Why am I sharing these with clients? Like, it never made any logical sense. But I would share these measurement plans. I'd be like, we're going to do this and this and this. And then eventually I would go in and actually do the work. And that's how they would realize whether they were actually making money or if they were actually losing money. So then eventually at one point that would end up turning into monthly management work where they would end up seeing significant increases or decreases in a good way in their account. And that was because I don't know how to explain it. Like, I'm just really good at looking at large sets of data and being able to figure out what I need to do to create the result that I wanted. And even though as the platforms change, like obviously that's changed on my end as well a little bit, but for the most part, I can look at an account that has history and be able to figure out where the pain points really are. So that became like my reputation as the girl who fixed ad accounts. And then slowly but surely it just became like this ongoing thing, and just showing up to meetups for SEO people or web dev or UI and UX, and getting these weird looks from everybody going, why are you here? Like, you're not in our field. Like, digital marketing, yes, but you're not specific. You don't really know anything. Like UI, UX, you could ask me a question about it now. I would not know how to answer it.
Sure.
No idea. I have many friends in it. I could refer you that way, but like, I just wanted to get to know people that understood my life to a certain degree. And that was the best way for me to do it. Just like how I had entered that Google Ads community. I was just looking for people who I could talk to. And it turned out that it worked out in my favor, because then when everybody else left their agencies to go start their own companies or work for bigger companies, and that they needed help with ads, I was naturally the first person that they ended up calling. And then that just became like this whole thing where online everybody was like, okay, Ameet's the AdWords girl. And then I totally turned my entire brand into the AdWords girl. And I know that it's not, AdWords isn't technically relevant anymore. It's Google Ads now. But like for me, it was AdWords for like a large part of my career. And I refuse to call it anything else really at this point. Even to the annoyance of some of my colleagues, where they're just like, switch your name already. And I'm like, nope, not happening. I'm going to stay AdWords till my last breath if I can. So it's just one of those things where I somehow created this brand, and I'm very grateful for it, because I kind of just slipped into it. And then eventually that started just snowballing referrals. So even now to this day, most of our business that closes is referral, because everybody just to a certain degree just got to a point where they would just speak, thankfully, so highly of me that people would want to work. And now what we end up seeing with a lot of our referral clients is they'll be like, oh, we got referred by 2 or 3 people versus the one now. So it's grown, which is really cool for me, because I was like, oh, I didn't realize so many people knew who I was, and like these random little bits in like the cities and stuff like that. But I'm very grateful. It's been
I was going to say, you made a great point in regards to relationships. When you build relationships with people and in communities, and they get to know a little bit more about you, and you're not necessarily there just for that transactional nature of the relationship, but because it's a community that you can engage with people in. But they do get to know you, and they get to know what you're doing and who you're serving. So you become that first person that's thought of. When you are the AdWords girl, you can still be the AdWords girl, even if it is Google Ads. And it continues to build, like you said, in snowballs. Then you do good work for one company and another, and they continue to refer others to you, so that you can continue to do good work with new people as well.
Yeah, and I think if you're truly passionate about what you do, regardless of whether or not you went into like a meetup or something to meet new people, like that really does shine through. So I used to do talks on SEO sometimes, but then somehow I'd always loop in like PPC, and they're just ever so slightly. So just enough that people would like be like, oh yeah, she does ads, but she's talking about SEO today for like whatever reason. Cause like a couple of my friends would have like content meetups, and they're like, you're the closest to SEO that we have at this moment.
Yep.
Will you do it? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So then I would sit there and have all these discussions
Yep.
about SEO, and then loop in PPC a little bit. And that would kind of, again, just solidify my brand a little bit more. But I had no idea that I was doing that. It was just, I was helping friends out. I wanted to make new friends, and I wanted people to know who I was. And it's kind of cool to see all these people who have admitted to admiring for me for so many years turn into agency owners and now are colleagues. And that for them, that's like a really big moment where I'm like, I don't even understand how I created something. Like it doesn't compute in my head, where it's just like, I created this whole thing where like they're like in this very small group of people in this city that nobody really like pays attention to a certain degree. I'm like basically like a little bit of a mini celebrity, and I had no idea until a couple years ago when people were like, oh my God, it's you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I just live. I'm just existing. I don't know what else I'm supposed to be doing here.
And your passion shows through, and that makes a big difference. So people see that. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I have one question that I do like to ask all of the guests that I have on my show in regards to our $1 million question. If you were to be given $1 million to do something for your business, to invest in your business in any way, what would you do and why?
I would want to nail down systems and processes and workflows a bit more. I think that's where I lack quite a bit. I'm a numbers person. Data analysis is literally everything to me. I love it. Love it so much that it's seeped into my personal life so much. But it's actually understanding what goes on in here and translating it into a system that's been really, really difficult for me. So we've been kind of plugging away at it for a year or two, but it's not solid yet, even to this day. So if I could invest $1 million, I would literally just put it into systems and processes and make sure that everything could be, as much as we possibly could automate, I would want all of it automated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's a solid answer. I mean, workflows, processes, automation creates that ability to continue to scale and serve more people.
Exactly. And I just want to make it easier for everybody on the team in terms of how we're supposed to do stuff, and like that kind of work as well, just to make it easier and standardized. Because the one thing that I've noticed is that if between analyst to analyst, everybody has their own way of doing things. But when that analyst leaves, you're left with like this account, and you're just kind of like, if you don't know their system, you have no idea what they were doing. So then you have to go in and break everything up in your own little way. And it's kind of fascinating to see that. And I love it, because then I learn new things. But at the same time, if I want to scale a company, I don't want to be learning something new every 6, 7, possibly year, however long they stay for. I don't want to be learning something new that frequently, where I have to adjust everything all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. So having good systems, good workflows in place would make a big difference. Now, if our guests would be interested in reaching out to you, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Oh gosh, you can find me basically on any social platform under AdWords Girl.
Okay.
And then our website is hopskipmedia.com.
Okay. All right. We'll add that to the show notes. Hopskipmedia.com or AdWords Girl on any social media platform. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for being a part of the show today. I really appreciate your enthusiasm, your passion. It shines through just in this conversation and what you do. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.